Morning, good afternoon, good evening. The call of the wild. As much as many Zimbabweans out there would aspire to live in a democratic Zimbabwe, it is shocking how difficult, near impossible, that is to be. Each time the nation elects people to deliver on that point, to make sure that Zimbabwe is a democracy. It's amazing how when those few people get into positions of power, how quickly they forget what they are there for. The call of the wild. The temptation to dominate is too much. And some of them can't resist it. Let me be very clear from the word go. In the late 1990s, the people of Zimbabwe realized that the country was in a political and economic mess because Zanu PF had abandoned the values and aspirations of the liberation struggle, freedom and human dignity for all Zimbabweans. They got nearer to power, and all they could think of is consolidating their iron grip on power. By the late 1990s, the people of Zimbabwe realized that Zanu PF was determined that they should have the divine right to rule the country, and the rest of us should have no meaningful say. And to attain their aspiration, they were riding roughshod over the people's rights, freedoms, and basic dignity. The people came to the conclusion that the only way to stop them was either to have another liberation war or to elect opposition leaders who will see to it that they implement the democratic changes necessary to restore the rights and freedoms of all the citizens. Morgan Tsvangirai and his friends offered themselves and promised to bring about those democratic changes. They did. They named the party the Movement for Democratic Change. It is shocking how the party has not only failed to deliver on those promises, but they've now become a partner of Zanu PF. There's no denying that MDC, CCC have failed to implement even one token reform in 24 years of that party's existence. And they've been participating in these flawed elections out of greed. I've shown on this screen a quotation from David Coulthard admitting that very point, those very points. So we have found ourselves in this situation. And when people have attempted to hold MDC CCC leaders to account, their attitude of the MDC leaders has been shocking. They genuinely believe no one should hold them to account. Yesterday, I dealt with this subject and brought about and was discussing it on the basis of some WhatsApp messages that have been floating around in our group from none other than Chief Svosve, who to many people know is the voice and the key player anyway. I don't know whether he owns it or not, of Change Radio. He is a senior member of MDC CCC in North America, and many of you people have seen him on videos and so forth. These are some of the comments that he had passed. Blatant accusations and even threats. All these came about because I had dared to ask the question, ask him and CCC leaders like Nelson Chamisa. Did Nelson Chamisa lie when he said he had plugged the vote-taking loopholes? And instead of answering the question, all I got was these threats and accusations. and these threats and accusations have continued. This was the latest one. Why do you attack Chamisa more than you attack ED? Why are you more angry with the opposition than with the ruling party? And please don't forget to tell in this group how you have accumulated farms and lodges in Zimbabwe. I see you always duck that question. Handeyi tiwone. Well, it's laughable. I think one needs to address this point. Why do I attack Chamisa more than I attack ED? Again, we go back to what I said at the beginning. The MDC CCC were elected by the people to deal with the question of Zanu PF rigging the elections and imposing themselves on the nation. The people of Zimbabwe risked all to elect MDC. And their number one task is to implement the reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And after 24 years, not even one token reform implemented. We're still with MDC CCC not only participating in rigged elections, but conning people to participate in these rigged elections. One had to ask, why? Why has MDC failed to implement the reforms? Why is MDC participating in these flawed elections only to give Zanu PF legitimacy? And then when you ask that question, you're accused of attacking Nelson Chamisa. Of course, it's pathetic. Why is holding Nelson Chamisa to account now being construed as attacking him? Clearly, these people, for all their pretense that they're democratic, they have no notion of what democracy is. But what is more, they don't care about it. All they really cared about is power. They're not different from what Zanu PF have done. They will get into power at all costs. But to come back to this issue, I would want to point out that that question is very relevant. Did Nelson Chamisa rig the elections or not? Answering it is at the heart of whether or not we are able to get out of this mess. And I believe the answer to that one is that he did indeed lie. Here is a video clip of him telling the people what, well, one blatant lie.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifoiri. Plan yaMwari haifoiri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
Well, the lie is clear there. He told the people that he was going to those elections confident that CCC will win big. He even evoked the name of God. Hashtag God is in it. MDC was already starting to form his cabinet. That was God's plan. And people participated in those elections confident that CCC would win. Well, he didn't win. His promise to plug all the vote-rigging loopholes was a lie. Zanu PF blatantly rigged those elections. So let's establish that fact. Chamisa lied. There cannot be any denying that he lied. And this is not the first time he has done it. Chamisa also lied in 2018. He told the nation that MDC had stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. He was lying. Zanu PF went on to blatantly rig those elections. So it is important that we understand that Chamisa lied. Chamisa is a liar. Because whatever we do next is dependent on that point. The second point would be, why did he lie? Well, he lied because he wanted the people to participate in these flawed elections for the purposes of him and his friends having a share in the spoils of power. This is a quotation from David Coulthard's book, admitting exactly why MDC, CCC leaders have been participating in these flawed elections. They wanted a share of the spoils of power. That cannot be denied. We cannot keep on pretending that it is not true. It is true. And I think some people have continuously pretended that is not the case. Who are we trying to deny, to deceive here? Other than ourselves, of course. So the second point is, yes, the first point is, yes, indeed he lied. And the second point is, why did he lie? He lied out of greed. Let's look at the third point, the consequences of these lies. Well, the immediate consequence of this lie is that Zanu PF rigged the elections and got away with it. People have asked, how can you say Zanu PF got away with it? Well, in 2008, SADC and the AU condemned those elections and went one step further. They denied Zanu PF political legitimacy, which forced the regime to accept the global political agreement giving birth to the GNU. In 2023, both SADC and the AU condemned the elections as flawed and illegal, but they did not go the next step and deny Zanu PF legitimacy, because Chamisa and company had participated in those elections, and they'd conned millions of their supporters to participate. Whether you like to admit it or not, if you participate, when you have been warned that if you participate, you are giving the process legitimacy, you have got to accept the consequences. And the consequences were that SADC could not deny Zanu PF political legitimacy. And so by participating, we gave Zanu PF legitimacy and thus perpetuate the dictatorship and the suffering of the ordinary people. That cannot be denied. That is a reality. That is the facts. The last point on this matter I would want to mention is that there are consequences in pretending that Chamisa did not lie, or sweeping under the carpet that, oh yes, he lied, but it doesn't matter. And the consequences of that is it's going to happen again. We've seen this happen. Chamisa lied in 2018, for instance, and people did not take his lying seriously. And what did he do? 5 years later, he was back, made a similar lie. I've plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, conned people to participate in the elections, and gave Zanu PF legitimacy again. There is a real danger that Chamisa will do the same come 2028. After 44 years of rigged elections, we owe it to ourselves to put an end to this madness. And the first step to putting an end to that madness is that people must accept that Chamisa is a liar. He has lied before in the past, again and again, to entice people, to con people to participate in flawed elections, to perpetuate the nation's suffering. That cannot be acceptable. The next point that Chief Svosve brings up is, why are you more angry with the opposition than with the ruling party? Again, it only goes to show the lack of understanding of democratic accountability. The opposition was elected to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Yes, Zanu PF blatantly rigged the 2023 elections. We can argue all we want is that Zanu PF rigged the elections, but we cannot also ignore the fact that we should have implemented the reforms to stop them rigging the elections. And in this particular case, we have got to ask those who were tasked, were given that task to implement those reforms, and hold them to account. It is nonsensical that when we do that, to turn around and say, oh, no, you should blame Zanu PF. Blame Zanu PF for what? We didn't expect Zanu PF to implement reforms. That is why we knew we needed the opposition to do that work. And it is therefore the opposition that we should hold to account for failing to carry out that task. As for the third point, please do not forget to tell this group how you have accumulated farms and lodges in Zimbabwe. I've dealt with this point yesterday, and I'll deal with it again. I do not know of these accumulated farms and lodges. If you, Chief Svosve, know, and from your allegations here, you claim to know, please go ahead and tell us which farms I own and which lodges I own in Zimbabwe. Because I don't know. I don't own any farms. I don't own any lodges. This is not just a shot in the dark. This is exactly what Zanu PF has been doing. Bribing people, threatening people, blackmailing people. These are the Zanu PF tactics. And I thought we were fighting all these last 44 years to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. And yet, here we are. The very party that we thought was fighting to create a democratic Zimbabwe has since been copying the Zanu PF dirty tactics and is making itself in Zanu PF's own image. We want to have a meaningful debate on this issue. It is in the nation's interest. We want a healthy and functioning democracy. And this idea that we should stifle debate, in some cases on the basis of dreamed up stories, is totally unacceptable. And we must condemn it. One can only wonder what an MDC CCC government would be like if they had the power to arrest and send people to Chukurubi. I think we'll be talking of that happening. This is totally unacceptable. We do not want to recreate another Zanu PF dictatorship. The last comment was from another contributor talking of exactly his attack on Chamisa is so spectacular, as if akatorerwa mukadzi naChamisa. Well, to be quite honest, the lying and conning people to participate in rigged elections to perpetuate the dictatorship has created a political and economic situation that has left millions of Zimbabweans living in abject poverty. That, to me, is more serious than an individual's personal vendetta or anger with Chamisa. If one has got to wait for some of these issues that somebody's raising here to hold Chamisa to account, it is tragic. What could be worse than millions of people living in abject poverty? What could be worse than millions of residents of a big city like Harare drinking sewage because of bad governance? What could be worse than the whole country was full of potholes because of decades of bad governance? The very fact that some people think that is more important only shows just how petty they are. We want a democratic Zimbabwe. It is in the nation's interest that we dismantle this Zanu PF dictatorship and replace it with a healthy and functioning democracy. More so now, when we know that the situation is only getting worse. Zimbabwe is not going to have any meaningful economic recovery as long as the country remains a pariah state, failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. It is shocking that in this day and age, we are failing to do something as basic as holding free, fair, and credible elections. Thank you very much for those who were able to join. Have a good night.